All right, so it is, thank you so much. It is Ha'azinu. And I created a session today based on, or largely based on and inspired by the Torah, the words of Torah of Rabbi Tali Adler. And I love her weekly Torah. You should sign up for it from Hadar if you don't know it. And we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. I saw Sharon Buckman's name. I hope, Sharon, you're doing a little bit better. You're there. And
good morning and Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Yes, I'm feeling a lot better. Thank you.
Good. Thank God. Thank God. Jay, so good to see you. Glad to have you with us. Shana Tova, Shana Tova. Hi, Suanne. Hi, Elaine. Okay. Anyone new, either in Zoom, in the room?
Yeah.
No, what's your name?
I'm Giselle.
Say it again.
Giselle.
Giselle, sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
it's okay.
working on this.
It's okay.
Giselle, welcome, Giselle.
Yeah, thank you.
Shabbat shalom. Okay, I think, morning, Craig. Okay, here we go. We're going to screen share the Rafa over Torah study. Company, you're welcome to unmute yourselves if you would like to. Baruch Adonai. Blessed are you, source of all life, who has gifted us with your Torah and instructed us to soak in your revelation. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. So you can still hear everyone. Got it. Got it. You know, I think we might have to end like early because there are going to be services here. So zip right along. So for those who just came in, this is Parshat Ha'azinu, nearing the end of the Torah. And Spencer, good to see you. Shalom. We're nearing the end of the Torah. And again, this is based on a Dvar Torah by Tali Adler, the Parshat HaShavua that is sent out by Hadar. And there's a link there if you'd like to read the whole essay. And it's, you know, it's not really inspired by that. I sort of went into other places with it, but you'll see. And I called it Moshe Nowhere Man. So, and it really, the question here is looking at Moshe as a entirely liminal figure. And the fact that, you know, he, compared to the Avot, the patriarchs in Genesis, not only did not die in, you know, the promised land, but his bones were even buried there. Like he remains in that transitional space.
So could you define liminal?
Betwixt and between, neither here nor there. In the place, you know, the wilderness, which is not Egypt and not the promised land. But thank you. So now we see a whole passage about liminality. So maybe by the end of it, we'll all know what it means. Anyone feel like reading that in the room? Moses and liminality.
Sure.
Good. Go ahead, Spencer.
Moses is best understood as the quintessential biblical liminal figure. His identity is liminal, he is associated with liminal space, and he is the transitional guide for the Israelites in their rite of passage.
Okay, this author definitely likes that.
This status made him the ideal tool for the divine task of transition that was assigned to him, and his role was essentially to guide Israel through her coming of age ceremony. The Israelites transitioned from slaves to citizens, from a people with a nameless God to one who knows the personal name of their deity. and from a lawless people to a nation bound by covenant. The Israelites completed these transitions by following Moses through the wilderness, a period marked by symbolic water crossings at the start and finish of this liminal journey.
So liminal the word can be replaced by transitional. It's a transitional figure. And, just to restate what the author is saying, he's guiding the Israelites from that passage from slavery to, running the society, which is a tremendous transition, right? And he reflects, in a sense, their state, right, of being in transition. Okay, so let's go on. So here we are in our parsha, Azinu. Welcome, Wendy. And we're talking here about the death of Moshe, and it says, "Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe be'etzem hayom hazeh lemor." God spoke to Moshe on that same day, saying, "Aleh el har ha'avarim." Go up these heights of Avarim, the region across. So, another way to translate har ha'avarim is like transitional mountain, right? Like, the mountain of going over, which is in a way kind of poignant because Moshe can't pass over, right? He has to pass over, but he's on the mountain, and he's on the mountain of passing over, and he can't pass over. El har ha'avarim hazeh har nevo. So it's called Mount Nevo. And one translation I read, or interpretation of Har Nevo I read, is that the Nun often means negative, and Vo means to come in. So he can't go. He's on the mountain of he can't go, and it's transitional mountain. I shared the Eretz Moab, that it's in the land of Moab. I share al Pnei Yerecho, that faces Jericho. So it faces exactly where the people of Israel are going to enter. And see the land of Canaan that I am giving to the children of Israel for a whole. So Moshe is invited to see the place where he can't enter, where he can't go to. Okay, 50, Nun. Umut bahar asher ata oleh shama. You are to die on the mountain that you are going up. And there's this word there, that you are going up there. And you'll see in a moment that that's emphasized in the last parsha and made sense of in the midrash. Ve'aseh el amecha, and you'll be gathered to your kin, to your people. Kasher meit Aharon achicha. The way Aharon died, the Hor Hahar, on Hill's Hill, the Asif El Amav, and was gathered to his kinsmen. Al Asher Ma'altem Bi B'toch B'nei Israel B'nei Merivah Kadesh Midbar Tzim, because you both broke faith with me in the midst of the children of Israel at the waters of Meribah, the waters of Merivat Kadesh in the wilderness of Sin. Al Asher Lo Kidashtem Oti B'toch B'nei Israel. You did not treat me as holy in the midst of the children of Israel. So, if you recall that incident, God instructed Moshe to speak to the rock, to draw forth water from it. This was after Miriam's death. Instead, what did Moshe do? He struck the rock. He hit the rock, and that was a huge deal. And that is given as the reason for why Moshe is not allowed to go into the land. Okay, 52. Kimi neged tir'et et ha'aretz v'shama lo tavo. Indeed, at a distance you shall see the land, but there, again that word there, shama, you shall not enter, lo tavo. And again, it might be sort of resonant with Har Nevo, right? The mountain of not crossing over, Mount Nevo. El ha'aretz asher ani noten livnei Israel. But there you shall not enter to the land that I am giving to the children of Israel. Like, ouch, right? You shall not enter, and I'm giving it to them. So it's really painful. Like, it sounds very matter of fact, very straightforward, but the juxtapositions cannot but be painful to Moshe. They're going in, you're not. You're going up there to die, you will see the land, you can't go into. Now, we discussed this when we've looked into that story, that in a sense, that's the human story. Right? We all get to a certain point, so we can see beyond it, but we can't enter. Right? That's the way of mortality. But the articulation of this in Moshe's life is just especially poignant. Right? This is what he worked so hard for. Look at this point that he can't enter with them. Right? This is the dream. Okay, Spencer.
Yeah, I'm thinking of, I heard, I don't know if anyone here has read People Love Dead Jews by Dara Horn, but she has the story there of this man who saved a number of, I think, intellectuals and artists during the Shoah. And you'd think a person like this, I don't think he was Jewish, but a person like this you want to keep in touch with, be very grateful to. Almost none of the people he saved wanted anything to do with him after the war, even when he was like on hard times. And the explanation that Dara Horn gives is that a person who guides someone through such a trauma, you don't really want to see them.
You don't be associated with them. It's too painful.
He was the liminal person in a way, kind of like Moses.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Wow. Kind of like Moses. He's that liminal person, and maybe God wants him to have nothing to do with him in the promised land. Okay, so let's look at another articulation of "you can't pass through there," and this is from last week's Parsha. Zota Bracha. Do you want a source sheet? I think there are more up there.
Let's see.
Yeah, or you can use this one. Or you can just.
It's easier.
Yeah.
Here.
Oh, sure. All right, here we go. So Vaya'al Moshe me'arvot Moab el Har Nevo. Moshe went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nevo. Asher al Pnei Yericho, the top of the Pisgah that faces Yericho, Jericho. Yar'ehu Adonai ekol ha'aretz et ha'gil'ad Adan. And Adonai let him see all the land. Gil'ad as far as Dan. It's kol Naphtali, it's Eretz Ephraim, Menashe, it's kol Eretz Judah ad hayom ha'acharon, ad hayam ha'acharon. And all Naphtali, and the land of Ephraim, and Menashe, and all the land of Judah, as far as hindmost sea, or the last sea. Et HaNegev, et HaKikar, Bik'at Yericho, Ir HaTmarim, Ad So'ah. And the Negev, and the round plain, the cleft of Jericho, the town of palms, as far as Soar. Vayomer Adonai Elah, Zot ha'aretz asher nishbatu Abraham, nishbatu Yaakov, le'mor Lazar Achah, it's Nena. Sorry, I can't see the vowels. It's Nena. Har iticha be'einecha v'shama lo ta'avor. So again, that word shama, there. And I said to him, the land I swore to Abraham, to Yitzchak, and Yaakov, saying, to your seed I give it. I've let you see it with your eyes, but there you shall not cross. Vayamat Sham, another there, and Moses died there. Vayamat Sham Moshe, Eved Adonai, the servant of God, the Hebat Hayes, Eretz Moab, in the land of Moab, Al Pi Adonai, at the mouth or the order of Yoteba. Okay, so now let's see what the Midrash does with this double articulation of the word Shama. So Amar Moshe Lefnei Kadosh Baruch Hu Im Eini Nechnas Ba Melech Ekanes Ba Hadut. So Moshe said, for the Holy One, blessed be He, if I can't enter the land as a king, I'll just enter it as a regular guy, as a commoner. In other words, I'll give up my status. I so much want to go to the land. Doesn't matter how I enter. I think about like immigrants who in other countries, they're doctors and they're surgeons, and here they're selling taxi drivers. Like they so much want to enter the land, so to speak, or enter their dream. Amar lo hakadosh baruch hu. Sorry, oh no, sorry. Ein ani nichnas b'chai, and if I don't answer it alive, ekanes ba'met, I'll enter it dead, right? Just like Joseph, whose bones were buried in the land, but he died in Egypt. That's amazing. It's like, I have to be alive. Amar lo hakadosh baruch hu, and God said to him, holy blessed. He said to him, holy one blessed, he said to him, V'shama lo tavo, and there you will not enter. V'shama lo ta'avor, and there you shall not pass over. Lo melech, v'lo hadyot, lo chai, v'lo metz. Not as a king, not as commoner, not live, and not. I know, brutal, right? It's like, ouch. Like there's a real emphasis on that. So we're going to try to make sense of that. Like, why couldn't even he be buried in the Holy Land? Hi, Elena. Hi there. Okay. And good morning, Wendy. I don't know if I said it. Okay. So let's look. We're going to come back to this question of why he can be buried in the land or even buried. Enter is one thing, but even buried, we're going to come back to that. Now I want to look more at Moshe as a liminal figure, as this figure of transition. So his very life starts as like having two mothers. Right? He doesn't have one mother, he has two mothers. Eric, you look more confused.
Well, no. Trying to remember.
Oh, we're gonna read it's number 5, passage 5.
Okay.
Asher Chaim, do you feel like reading? We have another voice in the room.
Yes, thank you. Vayelech ish mi beit Levi, vayikach et bat Levi. A certain man of the house of Levi went and married a Levite daughter. Vatahar ha'isha vateled ben, vatera oto kikov hu, vatispenehu shlosha yerachim. The woman conceived and birthed a son, and saw him that he was good, and concealed him for 3 months. Velo yachla od.
Just 1 second. As soon as this baby was born, he was hidden, right? Which is already a kind of, separation. Certainly not normal life. Okay, go on.
Sorry, I'm having slight screen problems here. Velo yachla od haspino, when she could no longer hide him, vatqah lo tevet gome, vatahmereha behemar uzafet. She took for him a box of gome, papyrus, and sealed it with clay or mud, pitch, vatasem bach et hayeled, vatasem basuf al svat hayor. She placed in it the boy and placed it in the reeds on the edge of the Nile. Vatetatsev ahoto merachok l'de'a ma ye'aselo. And his sister stationed herself at a distance to have knowledge of what would be done with him. Vatered bat par'o l'rchotz al hayor v'na'aroteha olchot al yad hayor. The daughter of Pharaoh went down to bathe on the river, on the Nile, with her maidservants walking along the edge of the Nile. ותרא את התיבה בתוך הסוף, ותשלח את המטח ותקחיה. She saw the box in the midst of the reeds, and sent her ama, her girl servant, who took it. ותפתח ותראהו את הילד, והנה נער בוכה. And she opened, and she saw him, the boy, and behold, a young man screaming, crying. ותחמול עליו, ותאמר מילדי העברים הזה. And she had compassion on him, and said, one of the boys of the Hebrews, this one is, Vatomer achoto el bat Paro, and his sister said to the daughter of Paro, Ha'elech v'karati lach isha menachet min ha'ivriot. Shall I go and call for you a woman, a nursing woman from the Hebrews, v'tenik lach et hayeled, so that she may nurse the boy on your behalf? Vatomer lach bat Paro lechi, daughter of Pharaoh said, go. Vatelech alma vatkra et im hayaled. The young woman went and summoned the mother of the boy. Vatomer lach bat Paro, helichi et hayeled hazeh v'henichehu li, v'ani etin et scharech. Daughter of Pharaoh said to her, take this boy and nurse him on my behalf, and I will pay your wages. V'teqach ha'isha hayeled v'tenichehu. The woman took the boy and nursed him. Vayigdal hayeled v'tviehu levat Paro, vayhilah levain. As the boy grew up, she brought him to the daughter of Pharaoh, and he became for her as a son. Vatikra shemo Moshe, and she called his name Moshe. Vatomer, and she said, Ki min hamayim mishitihu. At least the Hebrew etymology, Moshe, because I drew him out of the water.
Thank you so much, Ashwakayim. So Moshe had a few months, and then his mother put him out because she was afraid the Egyptians would take him and kill him. And then she gets him back again, right? Because she breastfeeds him because of the brilliance of her daughter, Miriam, who reunites mother and child. And then basically Paro, as it were, adopts him and also names him and draws him from the water, which is like a second kind of birth. Right? So two mothers, two births, and the naming by the Egyptians. So again, this Moshe is like a profoundly transitional figure. Jay, I'll get to in a moment. I just want to read this very short excerpt from a longer poem by Adrienne Rich, which came to mind as I was thinking about Moshe being taken from his mother. She says, and in fact, we can't live like that. We take on everything at once before we've even begun to read or mark time. We're forced to begin in the midst of the hard movement, the one already sounding as we are born. At most, we're allowed a few months of simply listening to the simple line of a woman's voice singing a child against her heart. Everything else is too soon, too sudden, the wrenching apart. That woman's heartbeat heard ever after from the dissonance, the loss of that ground note echoing whenever we are happy or in despair. So, Moshe feels like he, definitely fulfills the lines of these poems, right? Wrenched apart, right? First, early on when she puts him out, and then again after she leaves him, and we don't know how long. Okay, Jay's been waiting online, and then we'll call on Tony, and then we'll do some more investigating of Moshe's liminal characters. So I'm gonna stop my share and call on Jay, and then Tony, and anyone else who'd like to speak.
It's an honor to defer to Adrienne Rich. Three little poignant observations that came to me. One, the most recent. Moshe is named he who pulls out. Obviously, he pulled out the nation from slavery, but it's also that transitional issue that it was, in fact, the Egyptian who named him. Pharaoh's daughter named him. So even there, as the one who pulls out, it's already like in being in two places, so to speak, or in two worlds. Also, it just very painful or poignant that Moshe is associated with climbing up mountains. And here he's climbing up that last mountain in a very limited way, and so that's also poignant. And finally, Moshe was hidden at birth, and he was also hidden at death because no one knows where he's buried, unlike the patriarchs and matriarchs.
Whoa, and I love that. I never associated Harim or Nevo with Mount Sinai. That's really interesting. Right, Moshe, associated with climbing mountains, because that's also a transitional point, like location between heaven and earth. And also hidden at birth and hidden at death. Wow.
Yeah, the transitional point in Sinai is national. The transitional point in Nevo is personal.
Yeah. Yes, and yet his death is also a national.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jay. Okay, Tony. Tony, try to come close to the.
Oh, yeah. Three associations. First of all, the poem, whose most famous line is, "And what is so perfect as a day in June, or so fair as a day in June?" But earlier on it says, "Daily with souls that cringe and plot, we Sinai's climb and know it not. We Mount Sinai's climb and."
Wait, that's Adrian Rich?
No,
Oh.
that's actually a grandfather of,
Sorry, I fell out there at the second. Could you repeat that, please? Thank you.
I forget the poet's name, honestly, but it's that was one quote of that we're all climbing Mount Sinai, we just don't know it, was the reference. But the other two associations are a lot of Adrian Rich's poem, especially ending, reminds me of a lot in Rilke, where he talks about the heart sobbing that we, especially in we know elegies, but in a lot of his poems. Last but not least, I'm thinking of it, and when I think of it, I'll come back to you. Okay.
Thank you so much. Wendy. I'm sure you're speaking to.
I think I have the mic. Here. I think it's very interesting that God changes Abraham's name, Sarah's name, Jacob's name, and never changes Moses' name, which is
Not Yitzchak's name, not Yosef's name.
but
And not Moshe's name.
But Moshe is an Egyptian name, and yet when he gives him in the beginning at the burning bush this amazing task, he lets him keep his Egyptian name and never changes it.
Interesting, interesting.
Where he has changed other people's
I hear
names
that.
in the
I hear
past.
that. Yeah.
And if, to me, the one name that should have been changed was his because it's an Egyptian name.
That makes sense, Wendy. Great point. Yeah, Spencer.
Yeah, I'm also struck by that. I one thing I'm really struck by in this is that vatahar and vatere, the verbs for conceive and see, they aren't the same shoresh, but they have similar consonants. They sound similar. And Yocheved, the Moshe's mother, conceives, but both her and Pharaoh's daughter see. So there's that similarity there, and also that like Moses's story. There's a parody short story by Liad Shoam. This is Israeli author about Moses that like Moses was chosen by a political consultant, not by God, to lead the people, and the whole thing is that he like acts like a nobleman, but he hates Egyptians too. So he sort of appeals to the vulgarity and the sort of elevated natures of the people, but it's sort of a parallel that like a lot of the leaders of like post-colonial liberation movements, anti-slavery liberation movements often end up having to like take on the cultural establishments of their oppressors in order to be taken seriously. So like I know like Bangladeshi nationalism, I remember reading something like looks a lot like British nationalism in its early years. And so this might be why Moses has to be left behind, because he's the last vestige of Egyptianness in the Hebrew situation.
That's really interesting. And to add to that, so if you think about Yosef starts off as a shepherd, and he becomes powerful in the Egyptian sort of ruling, like amongst the ruling powers. So Yosef goes like this, and then Moshe starts off in the palace, and becomes a shepherd, right? So there's that interesting sort of
Another mountain.
right there. And I think Moshe needs to be a shepherd because he shepherds his people, through that passage. Right, the shepherd is again the transitional figure. Like wanderer. Okay, hit it, and then back to the text.
Yeah, in terms of this too much on the heart that Rich so beautifully speaks of, and that Rilke endlessly is speaking of. The movie Sing Sing, there's an amazing moment in it when the main character says, it's just sometimes too much on the heart. Where he had lost it, totally lost it, very uncharacteristically. The movie Sing Sing, by the way, side note, is just to be seen. True story.
See, sing, sing.
See Sing Sing.
See, sing, sing. Okay, back to our text. Okay, so what is Moshe's identity? And let's see how the daughters of Midian saw him. So Moshe runs away from Egypt, right? Pharaoh wants to kill him, found out that he killed an Egyptian, and he goes into the wilderness and he comes across these daughters of Jethro at a well. So it's another sort of, story of finding a woman by the well. But it has a particular iteration here, a particular theme of justice and salvation, because Moshe saves them. So it's different than the well scenes that we've seen in Genesis, which have to do more with fertility and courtship than finding a woman. Okay. U'lechahen Midian sheva banot. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and this is another thing. Moshe marries outside the Israelite community. Right, to add to that transitional figure status. V'tavona v'tidlena v'tamal'ena et ha'hartatim l'hashkot son avihem. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters. They came, they drew water, and they filled the troughs to give drink to their father's sheep. And also, Moshe's mentor was his father-in-law, right? Yitro, who's a priest of Midian. Again, a non-Israelite figure. So Moshe is really between betwixt cultures. And shepherds came and drove them away. Vayakam Moshe v'Yoshian. And Moshe got up and saved them and gave their sheep to drink. Vayash and Sonam. So everything that happens earlier on in Moshe's life is sort of a harbinger for what happens for Moshe with the people. Right? He saves the shepherdesses, he shaves the sheep, but he ultimately saves the people. The Tavona el Avihen. So the daughters came home to Ruel, and Yitro has a bunch of names, and one of them is Ruel, which is, my beloved neighbor. I'm sorry, no. Maybe shepherd of God. Else, not sure. They came home to Ruel, their father. And Ruel, their father, says, why do you hurry home today? But Tomarna, and they said, Ish Mitzri Hitzilanu Miyad Haroim. An Egyptian man saved us from the hands of the shepherds. So who do they think he is? Think he is what? Egyptian. You think he's Egyptian? Was it his language? What was it his dress? What's going on here? But he's not a Hebrew. The gam dalo dalalanu v'yash, and he also drew water for us and gave the sheep to drink. Vayomer el benotav va'ayo, lama so azaltem edaish. And Yitro or Ruel said to his daughter, and where is he? Why'd you abandon this guy? Right? Here, enalo, call him. The yochal lechem, and he'll eat bread. Break bread with us. Vayoel Moshe lashevet et ha'ish. And Moshe agreed to settle down with the man. Moshe. And he gave his daughter Zipporah. So now the rabbis used that detail that they thought he was Egyptian to help us understand why he was not allowed to enter the land. And again, it's gonna feel like it's a very measure for measure kind of thing. It sounds kind of cruel. But I think we're gonna eventually get to somewhere better, and Rabbi Tali Adler is gonna take us to that place. So let's keep going. You know what, I think I'm going to, let's see, okay, so I think I'm gonna actually just summarize this. So, here it says, God is explaining to Moshe, or just a little bits of it, why he can't enter the land. And God said to him, Amar lo hakadosh baruch hu, mi shahodet ba'artso nikbar ba'artso. The one who sort of admits or acknowledges his land is also buried in his land. Mi shahodet ba'artso eino nikbar ba'artso. The one who does not acknowledge his land is not buried in his land. So then we go through some examples. Joseph tells Potiphar's wife back in Genesis, I was stolen from the lands of the Hebrews. So he's admitting, he's acknowledging his identity. And then the Midrash explains that's why he was buried in the land, right? The bones of Joseph were taken up. But you, right? You, Moshe, and we'll go back to the Hebrew. You did not acknowledge your land. You're not going to be buried in the land. How so? It's not. The note Yitrot Amrot, the daughters of Yitrot said, Ish Mitri, Tilan Ro'im. The daughters of Yitrot said, an Egyptian guy saved us from the shepherds. Who shomea v'shotek, and who, meaning Moshe, was listening and shut up, did not say anything, did not sort of, break the misimpression. That's why he wasn't very well. Now, this is actually a very unfair reading of the text, because clearly Moshe wasn't there when the daughter said, oh, an Egyptian guy saved us today, because then the father-in-law said, oh, go call, where is he? Go call him. Clearly he wasn't there. But the Midrash is telling us something here, saying that there's something about Moshe's Egyptian identity that he somehow supported, that he somehow contributed to that misimpression. And that there's something about not acknowledging your place, which ends up meaning you're not going to have a place. Yeah.
What's the relationship of the Midianites to Egypt versus the Hebrews? I mean,
They're outside of Egypt,
they're
in the wilderness, they're not
Yeah.
enslavers. And Yitro, Jethro, becomes a profound friend of the Jews, of the Israelites. Right? A mentor.
I guess
and friend.
the question that I have is like, what liability would it have been for Moses to say that he was Jewish? I'm not
That's
Egyptian,
a
I'm
good
really
question.
Jewish.
It really is right, right.
I'm Israelite.
What liability? That's interesting. So if we could just think into that for a moment and think about Moshe grew up in the palace and saw his people enslaved. Does he want to admit that he's, part of the slave population? What does it cost to do that? What does it cost to say you're of a lower status, not the royal status? Good question. Okay, so I'm going to call on people who now haven't spoken yet.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Did Moses know?
So yes.
Sorry, can you
Moses-
come closer to the mic, please? Thank you.
I'll repeat. Did Moses know he was an Israelite? So it says that Moses grew up in the palace, and then it says Moses went out to see his brothers. Somehow he knew. How did he know? So perhaps he maintained a relationship with his mother. Perhaps he maintained a relationship with his sister. Who knows? His mother breastfed him. Who knows for how long? Right? So somehow he knew, or he found out.
He was circumcised and no one else
According to
around
the-
him was.
Wait. According to the Midrash, we need to separate what the Torah tells us and what the Midrash tells us. So when he's saying he's circumcised, according to the rabbis, he was circumcised. Is that what you want to say? Is that your point?
Well, if in fact he was born to Hebrew slaves, they would have circumcised him. And they would have, right?
I don't know.
And
Maybe, maybe not. I don't know.
and the tribe of Midian is related to the Hebrews because Midian is one of the sons that Abraham had with Hagar after the death of Sarah. And
Nice. So
and
just
so
about-
and then also in the Torah it talks about that when Moses' second son was born, his wife
Zipporah circumcised. So
circumcised
she
her
knew something
second
about
son.
circumcision.
So how would she have known how to do it if it wasn't a tradition amongst their people?
Nice.
And she had that capability to do it.
She was a Mohelet, absolutely. Right. In fact, we have a Mohelet in our community, Dr. Judy Sue. So in our time, women have become circumcisers, so to speak. You know, I guess Zipporah was that first woman who did that. Okay, Adel, did you want to say something?
Yeah, quickly. That God also has an Egyptian a name, Anochi, which is continuing. It's not ending as Moshe has to end because of, as was mentioned, that was the last vestige of the Egyptian identity. No, we have.
That, how did you know? I'm just about to go to that point. Let's go there. Thank you, Adel.
Thank you.
Okay, so look at what Moshe says at the burning bush, number 9. Va'ata, so God's telling Va'ata l'cha va'ashlit lachacha el paro. So now go for it. I send you to Pharaoh, say it's on me, and bring my people out. B'nai Yisrael mitzrayim, the children of Israel out of Egypt. Vayomer Moshe el Elohim, and this is like one of Moshe's, part of his long string of resistances. And Moshe says to God, "Mi anochi, who am I?" Right? Not mi ani, mi anochi. We're going to look for it word because the rabbis certainly thought it was an Egyptian word or a Coptic word. Who am I? That I should go to Pharaoh. That I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt. Right? So let's look at this word anochi according to the Midrash. So what do the 10 Commandments begin with? Anochi, right? I am God, but the word for I is Anochi, who brought you out of Egypt to become your God. Anochi Hashem Elohecha, Amar Rabbi Nechemia, Ma'u Anochi L'shon Etzrihu. What is Anochi? It is an Egyptian word. Okay, so they're meditating. The rabbis are disturbed by the fact that why do the 10 Commandments start with an Egyptian word? How weird is that, right? So they give over a parable to explain it. Lema hadavar domeh, and what are the things similar to? L'melech shenishba b'no, to a king whose son was kidnapped. Yamim rabim im hashvaim, and he spent many days with kidnappers. I have to say, this is like really kind of painful to read at this moment, given what's happening in hostages. And he learned the language of these kidnappers, right? So when revenge was taken with the enemies, and I guess his father had taken measures on his enemies and brought him back, he went to converse with him in his own language, right? But he didn't know his language anymore. What did the king do? He started to talk with him in the language of the captors because he forgot his trauma or through whatever, he forgot his own language. He was alienated from his own sort of mother tongue. And this is what God did with Israel. All those years that Israel was in Egypt, Sichatan Shel Mitzrayim. They learned the language of Egypt. Kishiga'alan HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when God redeemed them and was going to give them the Torah, lo hayu yodim l'shma, they didn't have to listen to God's language. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and God said, Hareini Mesiach imahem b'lshon Mitzri. But behold, I will converse with them in the Egyptian language. Anoch, like Anochi, Adam shehu mevakesh lomar l'chavero ben Mitzrayim ani. A person who in Egypt wanted to say in Egypt, I, who am there? Anoch. He says Anoch, like Anochi. Kach hatach HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'lshonam v'amar Anochi. And that's how God, I'm not taking questions now, or comments. That's how God opened up God's conversation with Israel at Sinai so they could listen by using that Egyptian word. So it's a beautiful example of speaking in the language of the listener, right? Appealing to the listener, speaking in a way that people could hear. Okay. Freud actually says that when Moshe said that he has a birth defect, that what it means is that he didn't know how to speak the people's language. Here, I'm just going to go in the middle. Recall the fact that Moshe spoke another language and was not able to communicate with the Semitic Neo-Egyptians, meaning the Israelites, without the help of an interpreter at all events at the beginning of their intercourse. This would also explain the statement that people did not want to listen to Moshe and believe him. Thus, a fresh confirmation of the thesis, Moses was an Egyptian. Okay, this is what Rabbi Tali Adler says. When God, number 12, when God refuses to allow Moshe to be buried in the land, God is not, okay, so here we get to this new understanding of why Moshe cannot be buried. And to me, it's a much more compassionate understanding, and it's also literary. It makes sense. When God refuses to allow Moshe to be buried in the land, God is not punishing Moshe for not identifying himself as a Jew. Instead, God is affirming the way that Moshe is and must be a man between worlds. God does not want Moshe to become, in death, a man of firm identity. Instead, God wants Moshe to remain in the space of the in-between, not as a punishment, but because that is exactly who Moshe is. In other words, given who Moshe is, that makes sense, right? And it feels much easier to sort of take in and digest than, oh, it was a punishment. Yeah, Rob.
Yeah, I disagree with that. Respectfully.
Okay. As long as you're doing it respectfully, it's
Yes,
okay.
he starts off saying he's a liminal character. And Moses,
That was someone else at the beginning.
oh, I'm sorry,
It's okay, but no, but that's her point anyway. It's okay.
liminal character. He was actually a transcendental character in that he had a path and he became greater through Sinai, he just rose above everyone else. And therefore he couldn't go into the land because he was almost, like a better term, non-human at that point. He was
Yeah,
such a
yeah.
transcendental
He
figure.
wasn't like an embodied person, like, okay, so I agree, and I agree. I don't see why they're in contradiction. Why are they in
Because
contradiction?
liminal means you ishta here, you ishta
No, I don't think it's that, this here, this there, is a little negative.
Yeah,
And I don't think there's anything negative about this. We're gonna see more, okay? Okay, I'm not taking second people. Okay, because I think we have to end exactly at 9:45, so I want to get to the last two texts, and then if we have time, I will take comments. Especially from people who haven't spoken first. Okay, so here we have a long Rabbeinu Bach, yeah? 13th, 14th century, Spain, commentator, and I just want to do a few excerpts of this. Okay. Second. Okay, so here we go. We're gonna go for, okay, so Moshe could have commanded the entire Jewish people to see to it that he could have been buried in Eretz Israel, just as Joseph had done. I'm somewhere in the middle. And just as he must have done, seeing he had carried Joseph's coffin with him all these 40 years, desert. So if they did it for Joseph, why did it occur to Moshe to ask for that, right? Joseph only had his bones buried. Moses, who surpassed both Yaakov and Joseph in his relationship with God, as Rob said, did not merit to have any part of his body interred on holy soil. Wow, it doesn't make sense, Rabbeinu Bach is saying. It doesn't make any sense. It was God's wish that none of Moses' body be interred in Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. It's a form of respect for the entire generation of Jews who died in the desert. So in a way, he's staying with his people. Right? That's really powerful. That's like his last act of generosity. He didn't, well, he did ask to go in, so it's a little confusing. He didn't have to have bones, and whose remains had also not been interred in Eretz Israel. Also, and here's the last point, which is also really beautiful. It was a consolation for all the many hundreds of generations of Jews throughout the diaspora who died and were buried in exile, which I assume is coming to most of us, right? Unless you plan to be buried or move to Israel. The souls of all these people are in God's care pending the resurrection, at which time not only Moshe, but the vast majority of them will also be. Okay, you don't have to buy. Okay, now let's look at Tali Adler, and then I will open things up for people. Rabbeinu Bachya, commenting on Moshe's burial outside the land, suggests that Moshe is buried outside of Israel as a consolation for all the many hundreds of generations of Jews throughout the diaspora who died and were buried in exile, as we just. While Rabbeinu Bachya means this literally, we might also read his words as a form of commentary on the in-betweenness of diaspora identity. To be a Jew is born in and dies in the diaspora is to be like Moshe, a person of the in-between. It's to read our Jewish text with a foreign accent, to occasionally mix in words from our diaspora language as we speak words of Torah. It is sometimes to feel like we have two mothers, and on the worst days, to feel like we are not enough of any one thing to properly belong to either. But Moshe's life teaches us that to be a person of the in-between also offers possibility. Sometimes the foreign word is what we need to unlock new Torah. Sometimes the halting, and think about Rashi, right? Rashi lived in France. Rashi, you know, the 11th century great commentator who wrote a commentary on all of Torah and most of Talmud, right? Brings in foreign words all the time. Sometimes the halting voice and accent are necessary to move a stuck people forward. When God tells Moshe that he will be buried outside the land, it reminds not just Moshe, the generations of Jews who come after him. Sometimes the in-between is exactly where Judaism is. So I love that. Because of course it affirms me as a diaspora Jew, right? So it helps me because I'm someone actually who, you know, every time I go to Israel, I wonder, like, why didn't, and there was a point in my life where I lived there and I thought of moving there and I didn't move there. And it's also always a little like painful, like, oh, that's the life I didn't have or thought I could have had. I've watched Shugim, like, which is Israeli series, is like the life I could have had but didn't have like 5 times. You know, I don't know if any of you feel that way or feel like in betwixt transitional Jews or transitional people in other ways. So those are the texts. We have, and I'd like to hear first from people who have not spoken, if there are any who would like to speak. Otherwise, I will move on to David.
What's difficult for me,
Can people online hear David?
yeah. What's difficult for me always in this passage, I mean, Moshe's called many things, but Moshe Rabbeinu makes the most sense because Moshe always seems to be apart from these people.
Yeah.
What's really hard to digest is that it seems like God doesn't really like these people. In fact, he
God
says,
doesn't really like his people.
yeah,
Right.
he says in Hazinu, I mean, basically, you're going to be doing this, you're going to be doing, you're going to do everything wrong.
Yeah.
You're going to be condemned, you're going to be all this kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
so having Moses not be a part of that and be an example if you want to get back to the real promised land, Moshe will always stand for that. And that's always why I felt like he didn't go in with these people.
He should have gone in.
No, I don't think he should have gone. I mean, because God knew that, I mean, it's very explicit in Hazinu, if you read, you know, if you read the poem and everything else, that the people are going to.
They're gonna
That's
sin,
up.
they're gonna sin.
They're gonna do everything wrong. He says,
Everything.
it's very explicit. There's no doubt, there's no question. and-
Right, so you're
And
saying like
it's
Moshe,
condemning in a lot of ways. So to have Moshe be the example as we're sitting here studying Moshe centuries later is
Still
what
mistake.
Moshe represents to me, is what Moshe represents. It's the aspiration,
then Moshe is the aspiration, not the people,
not the people.
right? Because Moshe sort of gets off the like, you know,
Yeah,
sin, you
Yes.
know, and then repentance, sin, repentance. He's not on that merry-go-round. Like the
exactly,
people.
exactly.
Yeah,
And
interesting.
also the example of it's time for new leadership. It's time.
So what doesn't sit well with you? You said
Well,
that-
just that, just that we are going to become these people. The people that the Israelites are going to.
Losers.
Yeah.
We don't wanna be losers.
In a sense, yes, in a sense, it's
That's
throughout
right.
history, it's been kind of,
So this relates to Rob's point also,
Yeah.
right? Is like in terms of his mom.
and it's very hard for me, as I would say, more of not a religious Jew, but more being a secular Jew. It's sometimes a contradiction that I have
Wait, you're a secular?
Between what? What you doing in synagogue, bro?
I only see your religious
I'm
faces.
struggling.
Okay.
I think you know what I mean.
I'm teasing you. But I also don't think you're entirely secular Jew. Also making a more serious point. I think that it is hard to identify. You know, it's interesting, getting back to your question about why didn't Moshe admit he was an Israelite? David also doesn't want to admit he's an Israelite, right? It's like, it's painful. And I think, you know, the Jewish people, like any people, we have our low moments and we have our high moments, right? And some people might think this is our lowest moment, and some people might think that it's a higher moment. But whatever it is, if you look through history, right, it's not always easy to identify with the people.
Yeah.
And especially in this part, I agree. Okay.
And we should,
But-
one other
Okay.
quick thing, just very quick.
And then I'm going to.
We should
Tomas
remember
and Sophia
that,
offline. Yeah.
we should remember that everybody pre-Moshe, it was a story, it's a families and father. Moshe really didn't have a father. His father was really God in a lot of ways. So that's
Or
something-
Yitro.
Yeah.
God, Yitro.
Yeah, he's not around enough, I think, to be a father, but anyway,
40 years.
I think the case can be made that God was his father.
I think that makes sense. Tomas.
Like these.
Just if you could indulge a little bit of architectural history.
Sure.
Frank Lloyd Wright, not a Jew, Unitarian, but his breakthrough when he kind of invented American modern architecture was all about this in between, this liminal. In the 19th century, they were like, there has to be a perfect map between place and activity. So you eat in the dining room, you sleep in the bedroom, and Wright, his breakthrough was we need an in-between. So his architecture was about thickening the threshold, deepening the doorway, making the in-between space literally a space to be. So if you go to the Guggenheim, you notice there's this low ceiling over you, which comes out into the city and extends into the building. And you're going under that low ceiling for kind of a long time. It's not just an instant transition from outside to inside. So Wright's revelation was like the in-between is also a place. And I think a little bit about like Mordecai at the gate, like it's not like either or, it's both and. You have a foot in both worlds, and you're kind of sustaining the dots a little bit, being inside and outside. So just the thicker transition, the deeper threshold, there's something that speaks to this.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm crying out. Barbara.
Hi, everyone. Shabbat shalom. I love this question of Moshe being kind of the outsider. We often need the outsider to show us the way, because when we're inside, we don't always see things that clearly. And it makes sense to me that he wouldn't go into the land because of that status. Too, he would remain diasporic, let's say. And the thing is that for me, I mean, just personally, as a Jew in the diaspora, I hadn't really thought about it all that much until I realized that I was living in a place where people had, the cemetery had generations of people, 10, 12 generations, from right at the beginning of the United States, and they were still in that same place. And for me and my family, and for so many of us diasporic Jews, we're just all over the place, right? The world is our home, and we're not rooted. I always saw it as the world is our home, as opposed to now, should we be rooted in one place, in Israel or in America, and the way that we look at all of those things. It's a very interesting discussion. It brings up a lot for me. So thanks for listening.
I think there's something about anti-Semitism and being located that are intentional, right? Anti-Semitism is sort of in tension with having, I'm saying obvious, but it feels right to say it now.
But that's why you don't want to be located. In other words, by being in between all the time, and that anti-Semitism and that in-betweenness makes it easy, to think about being in other places and rooting yourself in other places. And it gives a unique perspective on how things work.
Hey, thank you, Barbara. I think you're right. And, Moshe, unfortunately, I'm going to have to wrap. So I know that people want to say things, so we're going to have to wrap. Because I need to give people here a chance to do sound check. Shima, you need to do sound check?
Yeah.
Okay, we can wrap. So I think, at this time of being sort of dislocated, in a sense of like big time, like paradigm shift, paradigm shattering. Wherever you are on the political map, things are shifting, right? Israel, Gaza, the West Bank, America, things are shifting profound and disturbing ways. And for some of us, very painful ways. And to look to Moshe as a model and lofty